Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about humanity's next ecological challenge, and that is recycling batteries. That's right. Now, this is coming from a great article in Wired by Daniel Oberhaus, and I think everybody should read this. I learned a ton in this article, and it's just really good. Now, before I dive in to his points, I think this is an important topic. We produce literally millions and millions of batteries each year, from small watch batteries to car batteries for things like Tesla's, EV vehicles and all of that, to large industrial infrastructure, everything else. The focus of this article is on EV batteries for those that are made for Tesla, and other competing cars. But I think this is a universal problem that we have. Now, the initial focus of this Wired article is on a company called Redwood Materials, and to quote the article, a small company founded in 2017 with the ambition to become the anti-gigafactory, a place where batteries are cooked down into raw materials that will serve as the grist for new cells. I think this is important. And to continue on here, Redwood is actually part of a wave of new startups that are now trying to solve the problem that doesn't really exist just yet, but is looming on the horizon: how to recycle the absolute mountains of batteries from electric vehicles that are past their prime or just not viable anymore. Over the past decade, the world's lithium-ion production capacity has increased tenfold to meet the growing demand for EVs. So here we are. Now, vehicles from that first production are just beginning to reach the end of their lifespan. In other words, don't buy a 10-year-old Tesla, if you can't, because the batteries are reaching the end of their life. This marks the beginning of, and what the article says is, a tsunami of spent batteries, which will only get worse as more electric cars hit the road. The International Energy Agency predicts an 800% increase in the number of EVs over the next decade. We have seen every manufacturer basically declare that they are going to go completely electric. I even believe Porsche has done this, as well as Mercedes and all of that. They are claiming that they are going to get rid of gas and diesel, basically any combustion engine, and go to electric. And so this is actually a huge, huge problem. If you consider this point, each car is packed with thousands of cells, lithium-ion cells. And the dirty secret of the EV revolution is that it's created an e-waste time bomb that is basically a problem. Recycling is the only way to really diffuse this. Now, I've done other videos. I want to say it was 2 years ago or so. I did a video on just the problems that we have with the strip mining of nickel that it takes, where while it's a local environmental impact, the more of these we are creating, the more materials we need, the more we strip mine or try to get these materials. So this is an ongoing secular problem. So while we may be saving, let's say, on combustion, meaning the gas that we're putting into the atmosphere, we still have this problem here. Now, according to this article, there are two main ways to deactivate lithium-ion batteries and essentially recycle them. Now, the most common technique is called pyrometallurgy. Now, this involves burning the battery basically to remove unwanted organic materials and plastics, and this method leaves the recycler with just a fraction of the material, typically just the copper from the current collectors and the nickel or cobalt from the cathodes. A common pyro method called smelting uses a furnace powered with fossil fuels, obviously not that good for the environment, and it loses a lot of the aluminum and lithium in the process. But it's simple, and so smelting factories currently exist to process ore from the mining industry, and they're already able to handle these kinds of batteries. Of the small fraction of lithium-ion batteries that are recycled in the US, just 5% of all spent cells essentially end up in a smelting furnace. Now, the other approach that these recycling companies can use is called hydrometallurgy. Now, a common form of this technique is called leaching, and it involves soaking lithium-ion cells in strong acids to dissolve the metals into a solution. More materials, including lithium, can be recovered this way, but leaching actually has its own problems and challenges. Recyclers must pre-process the cells to remove unwanted plastic casings and basically drain the charge on the battery, which obviously then increases both the cost and the complexity of trying to recycle one of these batteries. It's part of the reason why spent lithium-ion batteries have been treated as waste ever since the first commercial cells hit the markets in the 1990s. It was often several times cheaper just to mine new material, especially the lithium needed, than to recover it with the leaching process or hydrometallurgy. Now, many of the challenges that come with lithium-ion recycling stem from the fact that the facilities that process them weren't designed specifically for cooking down batteries. But people at the forefront of the battery recycling, wave, if you will, that is coming now that Tesla is essentially starting to get to that point where you're going to have to recycle those old batteries. They're expecting that creating a dedicated facility will start to improve the industry's economics, meaning less strip mining, more recycling through hydrometallurgy or the pyrometallurgy, and so we have to basically take less out of the ground to make these batteries. Now, there are still a number of technical, political, and economic challenges that lithium-ion recyclers have to meet. Success obviously is not guaranteed here. So, for example, in the article, cobalt is mentioned. It is the most expensive material in most of the EV batteries, but the battery manufacturers are chasing new cobalt-free chemistries to try to get around that. It's uncertain whether the recyclers will still find material recovery worthwhile if the valuable minerals are not there that they can sell back to the manufacturers. But a new generation of battery recyclers are betting that they can find a way to close that gap on the lithium-ion supply chain and obviously make a profit while they're doing it. And if they're right, they may turn essentially what is a serious problem into a money-making operation. And I think that's a really important thing. We recycle quite a bit. Now, I've also read studies that recycling actually worsens the environment. I heard a very fascinating interview, not on battery recycling, but on cardboards and other things, that every time we are putting out cardboard, what we are doing is actually requiring more of a process, and we are just assuming that cheaper goods we can purchase. Therefore, we can purchase cheaper goods by virtue of recycling, and therefore we are increasing the population of the goods out there, and therefore we are doing more environmental damage. If goods were more expensive, we would buy less, and therefore that would be safer for the environment. Nobody obviously wants to spend $5,000 on an iPhone when it's already $1,500, but you get the concept behind that. I think this is something that is very fascinating. I think it's something that is needed to be discussed, but in this sense, we are now creating batteries that ideally would last more than 10 years. I know the graphene batteries that Tesla has been experimenting with, and other experimental batteries say, oh, well, this will last for 1 million charges, which should go way past the 10-year mark. Obviously, the next generation, the next revolution, and I've actually talked about this in previous videos and podcasts, is that cracks the battery. When I can pick up my cell phone and only have to charge it, let's say once every 6 months or once a year, the battery in my cell phone is going to last infinitely longer than it would if it's in its current state with lithium, where I have to plug my phone in at least once a day to charge it. I have a big phone. I like big phones, and so by virtue of that, as I use it, it simply drains the battery even when I'm not on the Wi-Fi. So I think this is a very important topic that we're talking about here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but if you drive a Tesla, especially one that, let's say, is over 7 years old at this point, you are going to have to face this as you turn in that vehicle and, let's say, buy your next Tesla or whatever it is that you purchase. This is going to be the challenge, because or not, I shouldn't say you, but a lot of people are buying Teslas, one, because they are cool cars, but two, because they're environmentally friendly. You're not burning gas, but the next Tesla you buy is going to have a whole bunch of raw materials that aren't necessarily going to be there from recycled places, as this is just now a burgeoning industry. So I'm curious to see where this is going to go. I'm curious to see what the actual footprint of environmental or carbon footprint that a Tesla has as you buy a new one, let's say every 5 years, or whatever your car turnover frequency is. I'm curious to see where this is going to go, but I think recycling is a really good thing. And if we can continue to reuse, let's say, the lithium or the cobalt or any other materials, in there, and why melt down let's say, the plastics? Why can't those be recycled? Do we have the right process? I'm curious to see what this is going to do. It's one thing to drive a car and say, you know what, I'm helping the environment. It's another thing to realize that you've created a carbon footprint, or the manufacturer has created a carbon footprint, and we can't fully recapture that by continuously recycling that old Tesla you bought 7 years ago, how much of that is going into the brand new Tesla you might buy in 5 years after you get rid of this one, and on and on and on. That's the challenge. I think it's important. And while we're not talking about cybersecurity here, I think we're talking about something that the world needs to realize, or the world needs to talk about. So it's definitely your tech news for the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, guys.